Seeing Captain Tran stubbornly defend the clue I had mapped out through my sense of smell, Deputy Director Pham Hui looked like smoke was about to burst from his head in anger. He slammed his hand on the table. The task force is already so understaffed that everyone's pulling all-nighters, so where exactly are you supposed to find the time to verify this ridiculous route? It's a complete waste of time. What if another victim gets murdered? Can you take responsibility for that? Watching their boss get scolded so harshly, several young detectives frowned and looked ready to speak up in his defense, but a sharp glare from Captain Tran forced them to swallow their words. Deputy Director Pham was just about to continue lecturing when a shrill ringtone suddenly rang out, breaking the tense atmosphere. I raised my hand innocently. Sorry about that. Please excuse me while I answer this call. You all can continue the meeting. Deputy Director Pham might have the authority to breathe fire at his subordinates, but toward an ordinary civilian witness like me, no matter how dark his expression became, he could only swallow his anger and hold back his temper. Holding the phone that was vibrating non-stop, I slowly walked all the way to the end of the hallway before pressing the answer button. My eyes and tone instantly turned ice cold. Hello. A sharp, irritated female voice came from the other end of the line. You little brat, what the hell are you doing that you're only answering now? It's the weekend. You're not even working today. I was too lazy to question how she knew my schedule. Did you call for something? What, I can't call my own daughter unless I need something? What kind of disrespectful attitude is that? Talking back to your mother now? The corner of my lips curled into a mocking smile. If she didn't need something to squeeze out of me, True My Lu would never spare a second to remember she even had a daughter. Usually, she'd text me a day in advance asking for money or gifts. Not long ago, she even shamelessly forced me to cough up tuition money for her precious son Ha Bao Long to retake his classes, leaving me slaving away at work and living frugally for an entire year just to barely repay the principal on my college loan. The moment I showed the slightest reluctance, or simply had no money left to give, she would immediately launch into an hour-long lecture about being grateful to the people who gave me life. I truly couldn't understand it. We were both children she gave birth to, so why was Ha Bao Long the only one she doted on, while I was treated like nothing more than a walking ATM? But I knew perfectly well that the moment I dared to argue back, I'd only be rewarded with insults 100 times harsher. So I chose silence, letting Mrs. True dump all the trash in her mouth before deciding what to do next. After cursing to her heart's content, she finally got to the point. Young Master Levi had just called me. You're a girl, what kind of work are you doing outside that gets you tangled up in complicated murder cases? You're covered in bad energy all day long. Can't you be even a fraction as good as our Bao Long? He's such a well-behaved child. Yeah. Very well-behaved indeed. So well-behaved that back in high school, he beat another student badly enough to send them bleeding to the hospital, and the family had to spend a huge amount of money bribing people to smooth things over. Afterward, they bought him grades and shoved him into some no-name private university just so he could carry the title of college student. I thought my heart had already hardened, becoming immune to this cruel favoritism. But every time I was compared to him and trampled on like this, the bridge of my nose still burned, and a wave of grievance churned violently inside my chest. Young Master Levi Hao had probably called home to tell the family to pay more attention to me since there had just been a murder in the neighborhood. But once those words passed through my mother's mouth, everything became completely twisted. If you hadn't suddenly lost your mind and dragged your suitcase off to live in that slum, how would you have ended up mixed up in all this bad luck? Are you trying to make people point fingers at me and say the Ha family is cold-blooded and abuses their own daughter? Will you only be satisfied after disgracing this family? Hearing that, I could only sneer inwardly. No one had forced me to leave home. But the day I graduated from college and returned with my suitcase, my bedroom had already been turned into a storage room filled with old tires and broken electric fans. Before I could even set my luggage down, True My Lu was already standing there making sarcastic remarks. The house is cramped. There's no room for you to clutter it up with your stuff. Then her precious son, Ha Bao Long, casually added. Other people's older sisters buy the newest iPhone for their younger brothers with their very first paycheck. Wonder when our family will ever enjoy that kind of blessing. That very day, I stood there stiff as a statue, listening to the three of them enthusiastically discussing how to drain my future salary dry. That was when I realized there hadn't been a single inch of space left for me in that house for a very long time. Without saying a word, I turned around, dragged my old suitcase back out the door, and went straight to a friend's place to ask for temporary shelter. Back then, I told people I was staying at a friend's house, but in reality, I had crawled into a rundown cheap motel. After staying there for a few days, I found a tiny rental room in the slums and managed to survive there until now. Hearing only silence from my end of the line, True My Lou became even more aggressive, her shrill voice piercing through the phone. Every time I call, you act mute like this. Who's ever wronged you? If you're upset about something, then scream it out. Stop acting like some poor victim. I must be cursed to have given birth to such an unfilial daughter. We worked ourselves to the bone raising and educating you, and the moment you graduated, you packed your bags and ran off without a second glance at this family. When your parents grow old and weak, what are we supposed to expect from you? I bit my lip tightly, refusing to say a single word. My thumbnail dug so deeply into my index finger that blood began to seep out. Only that sharp, physical pain could temporarily suppress the suffocating bitterness rising in my throat. Don't pretend you're deaf. Are you trying to make me cough up blood from anger? Heaven, why is my life so miserable? Raising a snake in my own sleeve, a fox inside my own house. After ranting to her heart's content, she finally unleashed her ultimate weapon, crying about the hardships of giving birth and raising me. When I gave birth to you, I suffered in agony for an entire day and night. My milk ducts were clogged, I squeezed out blood instead of milk. I suffered so much, and now my grown daughter doesn't even feel the slightest pity for her own mother. I blinked my dry eyes slowly. Of course I was grateful for being born. But I had heard these accusations thousands of times already. My heart had been cut open and stabbed so repeatedly that it had long since gone numb. It was as though I had built an invisible glass cage around my own heart. I could still see everything, hear everything, but none of it could reach me anymore. I coldly interrupted her. I'm dealing with an urgent matter at the police station right now. I'm hanging up. I'll call back when I have time. The moment she heard the words police station, it was like hitting one of True My Lou's most sensitive nerves. She shrieked so loudly it nearly pierced my eardrums. You'd better not bring disaster onto yourself and drag this family down with you. If something happens to you and you end up dead out on the street, your father and I won't waste our time collecting your corpse. Were those really words a biological mother could say? I let out a bitter laugh and firmly pressed the hang-up button. At the very least, I could finally breathe a little easier. Looking down the hallway, I saw the sun already beginning to set. In another hour or two at most, darkness would fall completely. Would the police officers actually use my clue? If they failed to catch that man, not only would my $350 million reward vanish into thin air, but my own life would also hang by a thread after catching the killer's attention. Lost in thought, I suddenly saw Captain Tran Kian Kwok walking out. His face was filled with exhaustion and helplessness. My heart skipped a beat. Don't tell me, they rejected it? I refused to accept that. My clue was 100% accurate. Sure, the explanation I made up sounded a little too supernatural, but that route was definitely the killer's escape path. Just as I was about to ask a question, Captain Tran suddenly smiled faintly. I just made a huge gamble with Director Pham. He agreed to assign me a few people to investigate and follow the route you provided. Young lady, I'm placing all my trust in your intuition here. Don't let me down. Bring good news back to the task force. I wanted to ask why this man trusted me so blindly, but the words stopped at my lips. In the end, I simply nodded quietly. The team assigned to review the surveillance footage consisted of familiar faces again: Tam Na, the female officer who always looked at me like she wanted to shoot lasers through my skull; Tu Chao, the girl who had taken my statement; and Tun Hu Duk, the tall young detective. Captain Tran's expression turned serious as he gave the order. Check everything carefully. Absolutely do not overlook even the smallest detail. We must identify this guy's final destination no matter what. All three answered in unison, yes, Captain. Tamna shot me a sideways glare. I understood perfectly well what was hidden in her eyes. She was probably thinking that because they believed a brat like me, their superior had just gotten chewed out. If they failed to find anything, not only would the task force become a laughingstock, but the entire investigation would be severely delayed. Honestly, if I were in their position, I probably would have thought Captain Tran had gone insane for believing in something as ridiculous as tracking someone through smell. But prejudice aside, work still had to continue. The four of us stared intensely at the computer screens for nearly 3 straight hours. The boxed dinners on the table had long gone cold, but nobody bothered touching them. Suddenly, Tu Chao cried out excitedly, breaking the silence. Found it. So that's why we couldn't track him during the day. This guy took off his dark jacket and changed clothes during his escape route. Exactly. Tun Hu Duk slapped the table excitedly. If Miss Ha Muk Tin hadn't recognized his body shape and walking posture on the surveillance footage, we definitely would have missed him again. To be fair, with their investigative experience, they probably would have figured it out sooner or later anyway. But my presence, combined with the observational skills of someone who had struggled through figure drawing classes, plus my absolute confidence in the route provided by the rats, had helped save them a huge amount of precious time. Following the camera angles along the route from that night, we finally pinpointed the suspect's destination, an apartment complex, hidden deep inside an alley on Nam Key Street, right along the edge of the psychological safety boundary mapped out by the criminal profiling team. Tun Hu Duk said excitedly. This guy's mentally tough. After committing murder, he still calmly walked such a long distance back to his hideout. The young detective's face was flushed red with excitement. This serial murder case had robbed the entire precinct of sleep for nearly 2 months, and the pressure weighed heavily on everyone. Never before had they come this close to the killer. Tam Na immediately poured cold water on the celebration. Don't celebrate too early. We haven't even cuffed him yet, and we still don't have hard evidence. Based on this video alone, what grounds do we have to send him to court? Tu Chao and Tun Hu Duk nodded in agreement, but the excitement on their faces didn't fade at all. Breaking through the deadlock was already a huge victory. And naturally, the person who felt the greatest relief was Captain Tran Kien Kwok. Although he had acted extremely firm in front of Deputy Director Pham and even dared to stake his reputation on it, deep down he had been panicking too. He had simply closed his eyes and gambled everything on intuition. Who would have thought this supernatural gamble would actually hit the jackpot? He waved his hand decisively, his voice sharp and commanding. Immediately begin transfer procedures and issue an emergency arrest warrant. Tonight, the suspect must be brought back to the station. The entire police station instantly erupted into frantic activity. Honestly, no one was more eager than me to see that bastard get caught. Why? Because 350 million in reward money was waiting for me, obviously. That was why I stubbornly rooted myself in the waiting hall. I had to personally witness my 350 million getting slapped into handcuffs before I could feel at ease. And of course, accompanying me were the black rat and gray rat. After confirming the route, I had immediately reported everything and rushed straight to the station by taxi without returning to the haunted house. The rats followed along just in case the task force needed additional help from their four-legged intelligence network. Thankfully, the 2 stinky little furballs were surprisingly well-behaved. They lay obediently at the bottom of my tote bag, noisily munching on crackers. They even politely squeaked for permission before climbing out to use the grass whenever they needed the bathroom. I had already been waiting in the lobby for over an hour. Even though I knew catching a cunning butcher like him wouldn't be easy, I still couldn't calm the uneasiness in my heart. The 2 rats seemed to sense my anxiety as well. Or more realistically, maybe my non-stop leg shaking was making them motion sick. The gray rat timidly poked its tiny head out, its voice trembling. Pretty sister, that terrifying guy will definitely be caught by the police officers. Please don't worry anymore. And could you please stop shaking your leg? The black rat, on the other hand, snapped bluntly. Good grief, miss, my brain is about to fly out of my skull. If I end up throwing up in this bag later, don't blame me. I quickly stopped bouncing my leg and awkwardly apologized to them. Honestly, I was incredibly nervous. But we were talking about 350 million here. Who wouldn't be anxious with that much money on the line? Suddenly, the shrill sound of police sirens echoed from the distance before several vehicles screeched to a halt right outside the station gates. My entire attention instantly snapped toward the entrance. I jumped to my feet and rushed outside. Several police vehicles had just shut off their engines. Tam Na and Tun Hyu Duk walked at the front, escorting a middle-aged man whose hands were cuffed tightly behind his back. That shovel-shaped face looked exactly like the portrait I had sketched. The black rat and gray rat also peeked through a small gap in the tote bag. The moment they saw the man, both of them trembled violently, their fur standing on end. It's really that dangerous giant. He got caught, so scary. To be honest, goosebumps were spreading all over my body too. This was the first time in my life I had ever faced a serial killer directly. The man was walking straight toward me, the distance between us shrinking step by step. His face was painfully ordinary, the kind you could throw into a crowd and nobody would ever glance at twice. Yet the sinister aura and overwhelming danger radiating from him made the surrounding air feel frozen solid. Our eyes met. This wasn't like last night anymore, secretly peeking through a tiny crack in the door. This was direct eye contact. Those slanted eyes were terrifyingly cold and vicious. That gaze felt as though he wanted to tear me into pieces, chew me apart completely, and flush whatever remained of me down a sewer drain. He knew. He definitely knew I was the one who had pointed the police toward him. If he ever escaped and got another chance, I would absolutely be the first person he came after. It felt like falling straight into an icy abyss. My face turned deathly pale, and my entire body started trembling uncontrollably. Tam Na immediately noticed something was wrong. She roughly yanked the handcuffs, pulling the man sharply in another direction as she barked coldly. What are you staring at? Keep looking around like that and I'll gouge your eyes out. You'd better behave yourself and confess properly once you get inside. Although Tun Hyu Duk didn't understand why Tam Na had suddenly exploded in anger, he still joined in and glared fiercely at the man. We might show restraint toward other criminals, but trash like you that doesn't have a shred of humanity doesn't deserve to be treated like a human being. The man lowered his head silently without saying a word. But the instant he was escorted past me, he suddenly lowered his voice and hissed something horrifying. I'm innocent. I never killed anyone. But if I find out who framed me, I'll personally send them to the grave. Hearing the threat clearly directed at me, Tun Hyu Duk finally snapped. He swung his hand and smacked the back of the man's head with a loud smack. You're already inside the police station and you still dare threaten people? Do you think we cops are blind? Captain Tran, walking at the rear of the escort team, glanced lightly at the surveillance camera mounted on the ceiling before coughing awkwardly as a warning. Tu Tun, escort the suspect directly into the interrogation room. You've been in the force for over a year already, learn to control that temper. Only after the butcher was dragged inside did Captain Tran finally turn toward me and notice how pale I had become. He frowned. Mok, why are you still here this late? That guy scared you badly just now, didn't he? Don't worry. The suspect has already fallen into the task force's hands. There's absolutely no chance he'll be released back into society to hurt people again. My throat felt unbearably dry. Captain Tran waved his hand. All right, let me arrange a car to take you home so you can rest. You've worked hard enough today. This time, I couldn't even bother pretending to look pitiful anymore. The killer had been caught. At the very least, tonight I could finally sleep peacefully for the first time in a long while. But I had greatly overestimated my own mental strength. That night, nightmares haunted me endlessly. In my dreams, that shovel-faced man kept logging me out in all kinds of horrifying ways, sometimes with a knife, sometimes with a hammer, and sometimes by driving a car straight into me. I struggled between life and death through one terrifying scenario after another, trembling in fear until cold sweat completely soaked my back. The next morning, I gritted my teeth and asked my boss for another half-day off before dragging myself back to the police station to check on the situation. The moment I arrived at the entrance, I saw Tun Hugh Duk hurrying out. His expression looked unbelievably grim. He was so deep in thought that he didn't even notice me standing right there and almost walked straight past me. I quickly called out to him. "Officer Tun." Only then did Tun Hugh Duk suddenly stop in his tracks. When he saw me, shock immediately appeared on his face. "Miss Hamak? Why are you back at the station again?" I swallowed nervously before explaining. I wanted to get an update on the case. Are you certain that man is the killer now? He's going to be convicted soon, right? There's no way he'll be released, is there? The moment I brought up the case, Tun Hugh Duk's expression darkened even further. A terrible feeling suddenly rose in my chest. Could they have arrested the wrong person? Impossible. The black rat and gray rat had seen him with their own eyes. The sewer rat network itself had pointed out his escape route after the murder. Not to mention the murderous look he gave me last night. Unless he was the killer, how could all of that be explained? Tun Hugh Duk shook his head and let out a long sigh. There hasn't been much progress. The interrogations hit a dead end. Right now, the higher-ups have already identified him as the #1 suspect. But the problem is that aside from the surveillance footage you helped us uncover, we're completely empty-handed. We don't have a single piece of physical evidence. If we stubbornly push this case to court with such weak evidence, there's a 99% chance he'll argue his way out and walk free. No way. I blurted out in panic. What about his house then? Didn't the search turn up anything? He sent over a dozen people to their deaths. How could he possibly leave behind zero evidence? Tun Hugh Duk lowered his head, his voice filled with frustration. That's exactly why the task force is in chaos right now. This butcher isn't just mentally tough as steel, his counter-surveillance skills and ability to erase evidence are monstrous. The forensic team practically tore his entire house apart last night, but the result was still absolutely nothing. I'm heading back to his house right now, hoping we might uncover even the tiniest clue. Anyway, I can't keep talking. I need to get back to work. After saying that, he turned around to leave. Officer Tun, wait. I hurriedly called after him. See, can I come with you? Tun Hugh Duk froze and stared at me as though I were some strange creature. Miss Ha, are you joking? That's completely against protocol. You're just an ordinary civilian. The moment the words ordinary civilian left his mouth, he suddenly stopped, as though realizing something sounded very wrong. An ordinary civilian? Who was it that had dragged this 2-month deadlocked case back into the light? Wasn't 80 or 90% of the breakthrough thanks to my so-called supernatural intuition? Realizing he had misspoken, Tun Hugh Duk immediately fell silent. He stepped aside into a corner and pulled out his phone to make a call. Watching his sneaky behavior, I found it strangely familiar. Sure enough, a short while later, he returned and cleared his throat. Miss Ha, the higher-ups agreed to let you come along under the status of a special witness. But remember this carefully, once we arrive at the scene, you are absolutely forbidden from touching anything. Every action must follow my instructions. Understood? Understood, boss. I'd gotten so used to riding overloaded motorbikes that climbing into a police vehicle actually felt smoother than taking a rideshare taxi. The main suspect in this serial murder case was named Tru Vu. He lived in an apartment complex on Nam Ki Street. It was another ancient apartment building built sometime last century, just as run down as the slum apartment I was renting. Since the rent was dirt cheap, most of the residents were migrant workers who came and went constantly. The task force had already knocked on every door in the building, but even the neighbors living right next to Tru Vu barely had any impression of him. They had never seen him socialize with anyone, nor had they ever heard suspicious noises coming from his apartment. The silence surrounding him was eerie. But thinking about it carefully, it made sense. Truvu specifically targeted women who lived alone. He sneaked into their homes, committed the murders, and then calmly returned home afterward. He wasn't stupid enough to bring the results back to his own apartment and risk leaving behind evidence. I obediently put on rubber gloves and protective shoe covers before entering Truvu's apartment. Just as expected, the place was so spotless it made my skin crawl. There wasn't a single grease stain on the dining table. No leftover food. No garbage bags. Even the trash can in the corner was sparkling clean, like some decorative item that had never been used. Curious, I turned to Tun Hyu Duk. Did your team clean everything up last night while collecting evidence? Not at all. He shook his head. The place was already sterilized like this when we arrived. Most likely he had just taken out the trash before being arrested. I nodded slowly while scanning the living room. Not a single fly buzzed around. There weren't even signs of rats. This environment was far too hostile for my intelligence network. Officer Tun, I'm going to take a quick look inside the kitchen. Tun Hyu Duk nodded in agreement just as another officer called him outside to discuss something. Before leaving, he repeated the same warning as always. Don't touch the crime scene. I stepped into the cramped kitchen. The same terrifying cleanliness greeted me. Aside from an extremely thin layer of grease on the range hood, there wasn't the slightest trace of dirt anywhere. My brows furrowed tightly. In a place this clean, flies would starve to death and sewer rats would pack up and migrate somewhere else. How was I supposed to find any local witnesses to interrogate? Why is there a human in this world with so much free time to clean this thoroughly? I haven't even finished gnawing on that fallen strand of hair yet. I'm starving to death over here. I should have listened to my cousin and moved out earlier. This house is literally hell on earth. Suddenly, a pitiful sobbing voice echoed from beneath my feet. The voice sounded soft and whiny, almost like a 3-year-old little girl crying while throwing a tantrum. It sounded heartbreakingly miserable. But there were obviously no little girls at this crime scene. And a 3-year-old child definitely couldn't speak so clearly and logically. My eyes lit up instantly. Seeing that Tun Hyu Duk was still busy outside the doorway, I immediately crouched lower to the ground. Then I gently called out. Hey there, little cutie, where are you hiding? I've got tasty food here. Do you want some buttery cookies? Ever since earning the title of special witness, I always carried negotiation supplies with me. As I coaxed the little creature, my eyes carefully scanned the gap behind the old discolored refrigerator. A child could never squeeze into a place like that. But for rats, flies, or insects, it would be the perfect little castle. I quickly tore open the cookie package, broke off a tiny bean-sized piece, and gently placed it near the crack between the tiles. Using the sweetest voice possible, I coaxed softly. Come out and eat, little one. Aren't you starving? These are premium butter cookies, sweet and delicious. I've got plenty. If that's not enough, I'll give you more. Perhaps the buttery smell was simply too tempting, or perhaps its stomach had finally started a full-scale rebellion, because a faint rustling sound suddenly came from beneath the refrigerator. 2 long antennae slowly poked out into the light. At first, I was convinced it was a baby mouse. But right behind those antennae, a flat brown body covered in a glossy shell crawled out. Sweet mother of heaven. It wasn't a mouse. It was a cockroach. My hand trembled violently, nearly dropping the entire cookie pack. Why, you're a cockroach? Fantastic. Apparently my superpower didn't stop at mammals or winged insects anymore. I could now communicate with Little Strong, the immortal life form of the solar system. The tiny cockroach froze, its antennae twitching repeatedly. Are you stupid or something? If I'm not a cockroach, then what am I? A peacock? Its squeaky, bratty tone didn't even sound sarcastic. It genuinely seemed confused about my intelligence. Thinking about it, my question really had been pretty stupid. I forced an awkward smile and tried to sound friendly. Alright, alright. You're hungry, right? This cookie's for you. Eat up and get your strength back. But the little cockroach didn't move. It tilted its tiny head and stared at me with its countless compound eyes. Apparently its pepper-sized brain was overloaded by the shock. This gigantic creature called a human was actually communicating with it. Wah, am I ascending to heaven or something? Little Strong muttered. Seeing it still frozen in place, I pushed the cookie a little closer to its antennae. Just eat already. If you don't, you're seriously gonna starve to death. The buttery aroma blasted straight into its face, and the tiny cockroach let out a long sigh. Oh no. I must be hallucinating before death. A human suddenly understands my language and is even offering me butter cookies. This is ridiculous. Whether it was reality or a hallucination, the temptation of food ultimately defeated its fear. Little Strong lunged at the cookie and began devouring it like crazy. After finishing only half, its shriveled belly puffed up roundly, and it seemed to regain some mental clarity. It suddenly stopped chewing and looked up at the giant creature standing before it. Ah! There's a human! Little Strong instantly spun around 180 degrees, preparing to sprint back beneath the refrigerator. I let out a breath. Our smooth conversation earlier had made me forget one basic truth: cockroaches, rats, flies, creatures like these were born genetically terrified of humans. But after all the effort it took to finally find a witness, there was no way I was letting it escape so easily. I slammed my palm hard against the floor and growled threateningly. Hey! Stop right there. You ate my cookies for free and now you're trying to run? Take one more step and I'll squash your guts flat with my slipper. Little Strong screeched to a halt and curled up in terror. I immediately softened my tone, switching tactics from intimidation to negotiation. Relax. I just want to ask you a few questions. Cooperate nicely, and I'll give you this entire pack of cookies. Enough for you to eat until next year. Seemingly sensing the overwhelming sincerity hidden beneath my murderous aura, the little cockroach hesitantly stuck half its body back out of the shadows. Oh really? You swear you won't squash me flat if I eat butter cookies? I tossed the entire remaining cookie pack onto the floor and declared heroically. I swear. May anyone who lies to you spend the rest of their life buying instant noodles without seasoning packets. Little Strong still wasn't satisfied and added one final condition. And in their next life, they'll reincarnate as a cockroach. Good Lord. That was unnecessarily vicious. But for the greater good, I gritted my teeth and nodded. Fine. I'll become a cockroach in my next life. Only then did the little cockroach finally look satisfied. It crawled over to the cookie pack, hugged a piece, and happily munched away while squeaking joyfully. So good, this is so good. What do you want to ask me? Hearing that spoiled, dramatic little voice, I couldn't help laughing. How long have you been hiding in this house, little guy? Do you know much about the man living here? Little Strong's chewing suddenly stopped. Still munching slowly, it grumbled. I've been trapped here for half a year already. That guy's obsessively clean, I nearly starved to death. Luckily he sheds hair and dandruff all the time, so I survived by nibbling on those scraps. When he came home last night, did you smell soap on him? I asked. Little Strong shook its head. Not at all. That was strange. The rats had smelled a strong scent of soap on the man while he was escaping through the streets. So why had the smell completely disappeared by the time he got home? Could a cockroach's sense of smell really be worse than a rat's? I pressed further. Are you sure? Or were you hiding too far away and your nose stopped working temporarily? Little Strong puffed itself up proudly. Last night I crawled right onto his bed to snack on dead skin flakes, and there definitely wasn't any soap smell at all. I muttered to myself. Could he have taken a shower already? Little Strong answered immediately. Nope. He came home, took off his clothes, and collapsed straight onto the bed like a corpse. I froze. If he had showered here, forensic investigators would definitely have found traces of blood in the drain pipes. But the pipes had come back completely clean. Which meant he had already cleaned himself up and changed clothes somewhere else before returning home. Wait. That was entirely possible. From the moment he disappeared into the surveillance camera's blind spot until he arrived back in this neighborhood, not much time had passed. If there really was some kind of transfer station used to erase evidence, then it had to be somewhere inside this apartment complex. But Tun Hyu Duk had said Tru Vu was a complete loner who never socialized with anyone. If he had an accomplice helping him dispose of evidence, there was no way the police wouldn't have discovered it by now. I tried my luck and casually asked, "Hey, do you know if he went anywhere else in this building besides this apartment?" The moment the question left my mouth, I immediately felt stupid. What could a starving cockroach hiding in a kitchen corner possibly know about human affairs? To my surprise, Little Strong answered immediately. "Yeah. He often goes upstairs." The instant the word upstairs left its mouth, a male voice suddenly shouted from directly behind me. "Ah. Why is there a cockroach here? Miss Ha, move aside so I can stomp it to death." The horrifying memory of Agent Greenfly sacrificing himself instantly flashed through my mind again. Pure trauma. The cockroach was just about to reveal critical information. I spun around and lunged forward, hugging Tun Hyu Duk tightly around the thigh while screaming, "No! This is my star witness." His devastating stomp froze halfway through the air. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Little Strong instantly vanished back beneath the refrigerator. I let out a huge sigh of relief. Tun Hyu Duk stared at me with complete bewilderment. "Why, you were feeding a cockroach cookies? Huh?" I froze before awkwardly improvising. "And no. I accidentally dropped the cookie. The cockroach crawled over it, so I didn't dare eat it anymore." Tun Hyu Duk rubbed his forehead helplessly, his face twisted in pain. "I already told you not to touch anything at the scene. Why are you eating snacks during an investigation? What if you contaminated the evidence?" "Sorry, that's not the important part." I hurriedly changed the subject. "The important thing is that I just realized something huge." Tun Hyu Duk raised an eyebrow. "What clue?" "The blood traces on the killer. If he had returned home immediately after committing the murder, then no matter how thoroughly he cleaned himself, the drains would still react to blood residue. But there's nothing here. That proves he showered and even changed clothes somewhere else." Tun Hyu Duk was about to nod in agreement, but then he suddenly realized our current posture looked very questionable. His face immediately turned bright red. Your analysis actually makes a lot of sense. But could you let go of my thigh first?" I jolted in shock and quickly released him before scrambling back to my feet. Tun Hyu Duk staggered backward a few steps before finally regaining his balance. He cleared his throat. "Your theory actually makes a lot of sense. The interrogation and the investigation are both completely stuck right now anyway. This lead is worth checking out. I'll report it and have the team investigate immediately. I have a faster way." I seized the opportunity. I'm focusing my mind to sense Tru Vu's murderous aura. I'm certain I can locate the place he's been hiding within this building. Tun Hyu Duk stared at me silently. I could practically hear what he was thinking. The captain was right. This girl's definitely smart and sharp, but mentally, she's clearly not okay. Instead of arguing, he simply played along. "All right then. Take your time and focus carefully. I'll go arrange the personnel." "Deal." "Don't worry, I swear I won't touch anything or pull out snacks to eat anymore." Only after Tun Hyu Duk completely disappeared from sight did I crouch down and whisper, "Come out, little guy. It's safe now. He's gone. Big Sis is protecting you, nobody's gonna hurt Strongy." Little Strong slowly poked out its antennae, trembling violently. Mother of roaches, that scared the life out of me. I almost got flattened. Then it lowered its head and resumed devouring cookies. I hurriedly urged it on. Which floor were you talking about earlier? Little Strong answered between crunches. Sometimes he goes straight upstairs. My older cousin once moved his whole family up there to settle down. But after arriving, they realized the place was completely empty, there wasn't even a crumb to eat. He got so hungry he had to crawl back down and tell me all about it. I pointed upward toward the ceiling. Little Strong waved its antennae in confirmation. Yep. Right up there. I smiled smugly. Then I ripped open several more packs of cookies and dumped them all into the hidden corner behind the refrigerator. This should keep you fed for quite a while. Once you're full, find somewhere else to move to. This apartment's been abandoned for ages. Too many people have already been sent to meet the king of hell here. Trouvu's definitely going to spend the rest of his life in prison wearing stripes and eating government meals. Leaving the little cockroach happily hugging its mountain of cookies, I dusted off my hands and walked outside to find Tunhu Duk, who was assigning officers to inspect each apartment unit. I pretended to take a deep breath before calmly declaring. Officer Tun, I've sensed it. The killer's murderous aura is coming from the apartment directly above Trouvu's. I secretly curled my toes inside my shoes, trying my best to maintain the calmest expression possible. Tunhu Duk fell silent. The police officers behind him also went speechless. The atmosphere became awkwardly quiet. Tunhu Duk glanced sideways at one of the nearby officers before letting out a long sigh. I'll make a report. Then he stepped aside to a corner and pulled out his phone, turning his back toward us as he made the call. A short while later, he slipped the phone back into his pocket and gestured for the others to head upstairs. Headquarters just reported back. They're currently verifying the identity of the owner of the upstairs apartment. Let's go knock first. I quietly followed behind them, already fully aware there was nobody inside. Based on what Little Strong had said, the place was merely a public shower room where Trouvu washed away the traces of his crimes. Sure enough, Tunhu Duk knocked until his knuckles nearly gave out, yet the apartment remained utterly silent. Right then, dispatch sent back another update. They had found absolutely no social connections whatsoever between the apartment owner and Trouvu. Even more suspiciously, the owner had effectively vanished from the face of the earth 3 years ago and had been completely unreachable ever since. Legally speaking, without a search warrant or the owner's permission, the officers had no right to break in. Seeing their hesitation, I quickly jumped in before the lead slipped away. The owner's been missing for 3 whole years. For all we know, Trouvu might have already sent them to the afterlife too. You have to trust me. This place is definitely the hideout he used to wash away blood evidence. We need to get inside. Tunhu Duk stared hard at me. He was probably wondering where the still wet behind the ears girl got such blinding confidence from. But after recalling how my spiritual intuition had repeatedly worked in front of Captain Tran, he finally decided to gamble big. Suddenly, Tunhu Duk's expression turned serious. He leaned close to the door and shouted loudly. Do you guys hear that? I think someone inside is crying for help. The young officers behind him froze for a second before instantly catching on and enthusiastically joining the act. Yeah. I hear it too. It sounds like a child. There's definitely a kid trapped inside. We need to break the door down immediately. I stood there speechless. Good heavens. Were these guys recruited into the police force or graduated from the Hollywood Academy of Performing Arts? Their acting was smoother than professional actors. For the sake of my 350 million reward, I shamelessly joined the performance too. Officer Tun, I hear desperate crying too. Saving lives is urgent. Tunhu Duk immediately put on a righteous expression. If Miss Hamak heard it too, then it must be true. We are servants of the people. We can't stand by while citizens are in danger. Everyone, prepare to breach the door. The doors in these old apartment buildings were all made of solid iron. Trying to ram one open with your shoulder would probably shatter your bones first. I originally thought Tun Hu Duk would call the locksmith from downstairs like he did the previous night. But instead, he calmly pulled a thin steel wire and a sharp pair of tweezers out of his jacket pocket. Squatting down, he began fiddling with the lock. One of the officers beside me jerked his chin proudly toward him. That's Officer Tun's legendary lockpicking skill. Nobody in the entire precinct can beat him at it. Thanks to him, the child inside will be rescued much faster. Tun Hu Duk smiled modestly. You flatter me. It's been years since I handled this kind of old junk lock. Let's see if my skills are still sharp. Click. The lock popped open for real. My jaw dropped in shock. Were criminal investigators seriously this multi-talented? Since we had already committed to the act, we had to commit fully. Using the excuse that someone inside was crying for help, combined with the possibility that the suspect might still be hiding within, Tun Hu Duk immediately drew his gun and signaled for the officers to storm in and secure the scene. Only after thoroughly checking every corner, confirming there was no danger, and verifying that the crying child had indeed been a complete fabrication, did he wave me over. Is it really okay for me to come in under these circumstances? I cautiously poked my head inside and asked. Tun Hu Duk nodded. Come in. Same rule as before, don't touch anything. After hesitating briefly, he glanced at me and added one fatal extra condition. And please, for the love of God, don't pull out snacks and start munching again. I nodded repeatedly and carefully tiptoed inside. The apartment used warm-tone decor, completely different from the cold, lifeless atmosphere of True Vu's unit downstairs. But the sterile cleanliness was exactly the same. Forget trash, even the trash can itself didn't exist. Tun Hu Duk had already sent officers straight into the bathroom to spray forensic reagents. Suddenly, an excited shout exploded from inside the bathroom. Officer Tun. The reaction lit up positive. That suspect really did come up here to wash away blood evidence. Several officers immediately burst into excited cheers. Sure enough, after committing the murders, True Vu had sneaked up here to cleanse himself of his crimes. My intuition had scored another perfect hit. Tun Hu Duk turned and stared at me intensely. At that moment, the blazing look in his eyes made me feel like I'd transformed into the superpowered heroine of some detective novel. A delicate-looking girl who somehow possessed the ability to smell murderous bloodlust that he had spent his entire career chasing. That overly worshipful gaze gave me goosebumps. I seriously couldn't handle it anymore. I quickly spoke up to redirect his attention. Officer Tun, calm down a little. Try searching whether the killer hid the murder weapons here. My reminder finally snapped him back to reality. He immediately ordered the team to thoroughly search the living room, study, and especially the bedroom. And then, a horrifying, sickening scene unfolded before our eyes. This monster, True Vu, was a genuine psychopath. He hadn't thrown away the evidence at all. Instead, he had carefully wrapped every blood-soaked outfit from each murder in plastic and neatly hung them inside the wardrobe like some twisted collection. Every crimson-stained shirt represented another innocent life lost. Even the murder weapons themselves had never been cleaned. They were scattered everywhere. Inside the living room drawer lay a rust-covered hammer. In the study rested a cold, gleaming dagger. And in the bedroom was a chilling length of rope. Tun Hu Duk's face hardened, his fists clenching tightly like forged steel. He stared fixedly at the murder weapons as they were carefully sealed into evidence bags. His voice turned hoarse and heavy as he slowly recited the names of the unfortunate victims. Wai Mong. Tuna Lam. The tools used to send them to their deaths, they were all here. I stood frozen in place. Outwardly calm, but inside, violent waves were crashing through me. To be honest, murder cases on the news had always felt distant and unreal to me before this. But now, standing here and seeing those horrifying weapons with my own eyes, hearing the real names of each victim, everything suddenly became suffocatingly real. The silence in the room was almost unbearable. Tun Hu Duk looked at me with absolute sincerity. Miss Ha, thank you. Truly. If it weren't for you, we never would have caught this butcher so quickly. And most importantly, we finally have the decisive evidence needed to convict him." Hearing those words stirred up a tangled mess of emotions inside me: fear, bitterness, relief. I stayed silent for nearly half a minute before quietly replying, "As long as I could help bring the killer into the light, that's enough for me." The crime scene still required a more thorough forensic sweep. Tunhu Duk personally escorted the critical evidence, while I was driven back to headquarters in a police vehicle. No one had expected the task force to uncover the killer's second hideout so quickly. Faced with undeniable physical evidence, and under the psychological pressure of veteran interrogators, Truvu soon bowed his head and confessed. The serial murder case that had shaken the entire city was finally closed. The massive weight crushing my chest at last disappeared. I originally assumed the police were too busy finalizing the case files to worry about anything else, so I planned to wait a few more days before shamelessly showing up to ask about the reward money. But unexpectedly, Captain Tran Kien Kwok came looking for me first. The gloomy cloud that had hung over him for months was completely gone today. A radiant smile spread across every wrinkle on his face. I greeted him very politely. Captain Tran rubbed his hands together emotionally. "This time, we really owe everything to you, young lady. We caught the culprit, secured hard evidence, and finally the people of this city can sleep peacefully again." Seeing that I wasn't particularly interested in those empty formalities, his smile widened even further. Then he got straight to the core issue of my entire existence. "Miss Ha, the entire task force recognizes your contributions. As for the 350 million reward, I've already personally submitted the paperwork to the higher-ups. Though, you know how government disbursement procedures work. The finance department will probably take some time to process it." My heart skipped a beat. I hurriedly asked, "How long exactly? What's the fastest and slowest estimate?" Captain Tran hesitated. "Fastest would probably be around a month and a half. Slowest, hard to say. Maybe 3 months. If paperwork gets stuck somewhere, it could even drag on for half a year." My eyebrows instantly twisted together. So that meant I still couldn't slam a resignation letter into the face of my balding, beer-bellied boss just yet? So I still had to grit my teeth and keep grinding away at work just to pay rent? Seeing my gloomy expression, Captain Tran asked kindly, "What's wrong? Are you short on money urgently? How much do you need? I can lend you some from my own pocket first." I froze for a full 5 seconds. What kind of bizarre situation was this? A homicide captain was seriously offering a witness a personal loan? Even loan sharks didn't provide customer service this warm and considerate. I hurriedly waved my hands in panic. No, it's okay. I was just asking so I could plan my expenses ahead of time. Nothing urgent at all. Though of course, the sooner the money arrives, the better." Captain Tran nodded in understanding and promised he would push the higher-ups to process it as quickly as possible. "You've been through a lot these past few days. Your nerves must be exhausted. I'll have a police car drive you home. Get some proper sleep. If we need anything else added to the case file later, I'll contact you again." I nodded gratefully, then immediately jumped into the vehicle waiting outside and fled home as fast as possible. Meanwhile, after Captain Tran returned to his office, he paused slightly upon noticing someone sitting comfortably on the sofa. His expression shifted briefly, though he quickly forced out a professional smile. "Oh, Director Pham. I thought you'd already returned to headquarters." The implication was painfully obvious. Our district bureau caught the suspect, so why was someone from central headquarters still lingering around trying to steal credit? Deputy Director Pham Hui naturally understood the sarcasm. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the glass tabletop as he spoke evenly. "I didn't expect you to be such a reckless gambler, Tran. You actually dared to go all in on something that absurd. And the most unbelievable part is, you actually won." He paused before exhaling deeply. Who would have thought that little brat, still wet behind the ears and looking plain as dirt, would provide clues so critical and accurate they'd scare ghosts. She dragged my entire task force in the wrong direction, while your people not only captured the suspect but even uncovered his hidden stash of murder weapons. And now the butchers confessed too. I admit defeat wholeheartedly this round. Captain Tran smiled faintly, a cold glint flashing through his eyes. You're exaggerating, Director Pham. It wasn't gambling. I've worked this job for many years. I simply chose to trust Hamok's intuition and sincerity. Deputy Director Pham treated that explanation like passing wind. He stood up, smoothed out a few wrinkles on his immaculate uniform, and cleared his throat. Looks like this little district bureau doesn't welcome an old man like me. Fine then, I'll leave you all to your work. Captain Tran crossed his arms silently. Only when Director Pham's hand reached the doorknob did he suddenly speak again. Director Pham, have you noticed something? How long was it between True Vu's latest victim and the previous one? Director Pham paused before answering. About 8 days. Exactly. Captain Tran nodded, his voice turning heavy. But the gap between the first and second victims was half an entire year. True Vu's urge to kill was accelerating at a terrifying rate. Deputy Director Pham obviously knew this already. That was exactly why the ministry had issued a death order, demanding the case be solved within 7 days. Nobody had expected that thanks to Hamok barging into the picture, the entire operation would conclude in less than 3 days. To put it bluntly, that girl had practically saved his deputy director position from disaster. Captain Tran stared directly at his superior's back and said slowly. So yes, you were right. I gambled. Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't know which innocent girl would be lying dead tomorrow. Deputy Director Pham snorted coldly without replying. He pushed open the door and strode into the hallway, but the moment his back turned toward Captain Tran, the corner of his mouth lifted into an approving smile. That old fox. Back to me. The moment I dragged my exhausted body back to my rented room, I collapsed onto the bed and slept like the dead. When I finally woke up, it was already dark outside. My stomach growled furiously, so I stumbled into the kitchen and hurriedly cooked instant noodles with an egg, then sliced up a few pieces from the leftover roast duck breast to eat alongside it. Compared to yesterday, this meal was pure luxury. No clue when the reward money would finally hit my account, so I had no choice but to tighten my belt and save money. But the promise I made to the sewer rat boss? That I absolutely could not break. I trotted down to the wholesale market and targeted a beautifully boiled pig's head at one of the meat stalls. Then I spent nearly half an hour aggressively bargaining with the butcher. By the end, the guy looked like he'd completely lost the will to do business with me anymore, and only then did I grit my teeth and pull out my wallet to pay. My heart bled tears. That pig's head alone cost almost an entire month's grocery budget. Taking advantage of the darkness, I carried the massive plastic bag containing the pig's head to a hidden corner behind the apartment building. I released Black Rat and told him to inform his fat cousin to come collect the goods. But after standing there yawning for nearly 20 minutes, not a single giant rat appeared to claim the pig's head. Instead, Black Rat suddenly shot out from the sewer like lightning, tears and snot streaming down his face as he screamed hysterically. Big sis. My cousin's about to die. He's ascending to heaven. Please save him, he can't breathe anymore. I nearly jumped out of my skin. What the hell? The sewer underworld boss, the kingpin I'd just met yesterday, was already dying today? Had humans poisoned him? Or had stray cats ambushed him? Wait, stop crying and explain properly. What happened? Is he dead already? Black Rat shook his head frantically. Not yet, but he's barely hanging on. Hurry and come with me. Without hesitating, I grabbed the pig's head and hurried after the tiny dark figure that was darting through the night at full speed. I followed the Black Rat, squeezing through a narrow, muddy alley. We finally stopped at an illegal garbage dump reeking with a foul stench. Judging by the location, the trash was probably tossed straight down by people living in the upper floors. Using the weak flashlight from my phone, the scene before me made my scalp go numb. Scattered all over the ground were 20 to 30 sewer rats of all sizes, chattering and scrambling about. The reputation of the local boss clearly wasn't something to joke about. Even in such a crowd, spotting the big rat was as easy as finding an elephant in a herd of mice. The largest body lay flattened in the middle of the gathering, its fur messy and soaked with bright red strawberry syrup-like stains. It looked barely alive, as if hanging on to its final breaths. I was about to ask what had happened when the surrounding rats already started noisily discussing it. "Hey, isn't this the girl who understood our language before? Why is she carrying such a huge pig's head?" What a dumb question. A memorial feast needs offerings, right? She probably knows the boss is about to kick the bucket, so she brought food for us to share. Shut your mouths. Boss is going to be fine. He'll pull through. As expected, even rats split into factions. One group stayed loyal, sniffling and praying for their boss to survive, while the other group stared greedily at the pig's head, clearly waiting for the moment the boss closed his eyes for good so they could tear into the feast. The black rat squeezed through the crowd and rushed to the big rat's side, crying and shouting with tears and snot all over its face. "Big brother, wake up. I brought sister here to save you. Don't die on us." The noise woke the big rat. It slowly opened its eyes and stared in shock at the crowd surrounding it as if they were already preparing its funeral. I'm not dead yet. Why are you all gathered around me? Get lost. Disperse. It barked angrily while struggling to stand and drive them away, but the moment it moved, the wounds on its body split open again and red syrup-like liquid oozed out. The big rat let out a painful screech. The sound tore through the quiet night, both eerie and pitiful. Goosebumps covered my skin as I carefully stepped closer and asked, "What happened to you? Are you dying?" Looking closely, although the wounds looked horrifying, at least its organs weren't spilling out. It probably wasn't fatal yet. The big rat clearly didn't expect a human like me to show concern for him. He lifted his snout proudly and replied with a dismissive snort. "Die? No way. I just went one-on-one with a stray cat. Just got my clothes a little dirty, that's all." I almost burst out laughing. Got my clothes a little dirty. Where on earth had this sewer boss learned all these gangster internet slang phrases? Still, I had to admit the guy was pretty impressive. He had actually gone barehanded against a stray cat and escaped alive. The little rats around him immediately started showering him with praise. "Oh my God, that tabby cat is the tyrant of this neighborhood. Any rat that falls into its paws is as good as dead. And boss actually escaped? That's incredible. Seriously. If it were us, we'd already be mush in that cat's stomach. Boss is the strongest warrior in the entire solar system." The big rat had pitch black fur, so I couldn't tell whether he was blushing from embarrassment, but judging by the smug grunting sounds he was making, those compliments were hitting exactly the right spot. No big deal. Just some snot-nosed tabbies. Nothing to be scared of. He was in the middle of bragging when suddenly a cold meow echoed from the darkness. The entire rat colony instantly fell silent. Less than 3 seconds later, the crowd completely broke apart, scrambling into holes and cracks and disappearing without a trace. The big rat instinctively tried to run too, but his injuries were too severe. He staggered a few steps before collapsing onto the ground. The black rat trembled in fear but still refused to flee, trying desperately to help his cousin up. "Big brother, get up. The killer cat is here. If we don't run, we're dinner." The big rat weakly pushed him away and said dramatically, "Forget me. Save yourself. My story ends here. I accept my fate." Hearing that only made the black rat cry even harder. Inside the tote bag hanging at my side, the gray rat also started panicking and bouncing around. "Big sis. What's happening? Is there a cat here? Run, sis." I sighed and picked up a brick, hurling it hard at a wall in the distance. The brick shattered with a loud crash, startling a huge orange cat hiding in the shadows and sending it sprinting away. Enough already. Stop crying. I lightly tapped my heel against the ground. That fat orange cat already ran away. You two aren't becoming its dinner tonight. The big rat had truly reached his limit by then and lay flat on the ground, unable to even crawl anymore. He looked at me weakly. Hey, human, why are you interfering in our ecosystem all of a sudden? I lifted the plastic bag containing the pig's head in front of him. I came to pay you, didn't I? But looking at you now, how are you supposed to chew bones in that condition? I'll take you to get patched up first. When I bought the pig's head earlier, I had casually asked for a few plastic bags, originally planning to use them for trash later. Turned out they had another purpose now. I gently picked up the big rat, placed him into a plastic bag, and set off. I stopped by a nearby veterinary clinic. The moment I said I wanted emergency treatment for a sewer rat, the receptionist stared at me like I'd escaped from a psychiatric hospital. But because of her professionalism, she politely apologized and firmly sent me away. I refused to give up and ran to a second clinic. Same result. By the third clinic, I had gotten smarter. I lied and said my stray cat at home had gotten into a fight and needed disinfectant, bandages, ointment, and a few basic medical supplies. After paying, my heart nearly shattered. $200 gone. Back at my room, I thoroughly washed my hands with antibacterial soap before pulling out my patient. Before touching him, I warned him carefully. No biting back, got it? If you bite me, I'll have to drag myself off for rabies shots, and that costs a fortune. I'm dirt poor, I can't afford that. The big rat curled his lip. Human meat smells fishy anyway. As if I'd want to bite you. Sure. I'm fishy. My syrup's poisonous too. As I spoke, I carefully dipped a cotton swab into saline solution and gently cleaned away the dirt and red syrup stains from his body. So no biting. If you bite me, you'll be the one logging out first. The big rat fumed with annoyance. Old lady, even if you begged me to bite you, I'd turn it down. I ignored his grumbling and focused on my work. The injuries were varied. Some places had skin torn open by claws, while others clearly bore fang marks. The black rat stood nearby, sniffling and crying as he watched his cousin wince from the sting of the medicine. The gray rat inside the bag also started quietly sobbing along. Unlike his two soft-hearted little brothers, the big rat acted like a true street gangster. Not only did he refuse to groan in pain, but he even turned to comfort them. Though his version of comfort felt a little off. Would you two stop crying already? These are glorious battle scars. If I hadn't stepped up and gone one-on-one today, would your scrawny little bodies even be enough to fill that tabby's teeth? Once the medicine kicks in and I recover, I'll still be the boss. Yes, boss, the black rat replied softly with a nod. And listen carefully. That huge pig's head is my exclusive payment. If any of you so much as touch a single pig hair, I'll pluck every whisker off your faces. Got it? The black rat wiped his nose and answered. No one's taking it from you, big brother. Just focus on getting better. The gray rat timidly added. I only like sweet butter cookies. I don't like pig heads. The big rat snorted. Humph, country bumpkin with no appreciation for fine cuisine. I stood nearby cleaning up the bandages, listening to the conversation between these three sewer gangsters with a laugh I was trying hard to suppress. Quiet. No arguing. I scolded lightly. You barely moved and your red syrup's already leaking again. Let me finish treating your wounds before you start running your mouth. The big rat immediately shut up, glaring resentfully with his tiny eyes at the annoying human who had pinned him down. From his perspective, humans were giant creatures with smooth skin and not a single strand of protective fur, disgusting to look at. But the hands applying medicine to him were warm and gentle. And this girl also carried a faint pleasant scent. He pulled his little head back and muttered. Why am I actually listening to this human girl? So annoying. After finishing the treatment and forcing him to take anti-inflammatory medicine, the big rat finally lost the battle against sleep. He passed out. The black rat jumped in fright and cried out, rushing forward to shake him. I quickly stopped him. Relax. He's just sleeping. Really, sis? The black rat asked suspiciously. The gray rat standing nearby nodded seriously. Boss is snoring. Sure enough, soft rhythmic snores were coming from the little black furball. I was speechless. He sounded like 20 rice cake pots steaming at once. I had never imagined there would come a day when I'd sit around listening to a sewer rat snore. The black rat finally let out a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Thank you, young lady. The awkward way he addressed me made me laugh. You can just call me Mock or Sister Ha, sounds friendlier. Oh okay, Sister Ha. The black rat awkwardly looked at the oversized bandages wrapped around his cousin and then back at me. The smile on my face widened. Are you too hungry? I'll go get some cookies. At that point, in my poor little rented room, there really wasn't anything else besides butter cookies. The other day I caught an online sale and bought an entire 5-kilogram box of cookies. After stacking discount coupons and promo codes, the total came out to less than $35, cheap as dirt. The trade-off was that the ingredients list on the back was absurdly long. Longer than my own lifespan, probably. But whatever. Sewer rats had stomachs of steel. A few additives probably wouldn't even make a dent. The gray rat looked delighted, hopping around me excitedly while chanting, Sister Ha number 1. Meanwhile, the black rat still stood nearby anxiously guarding his older cousin. I didn't say anything else. I had done what I could. Whether the big rat lived or died now depended entirely on his own will to survive. I returned to my desk and buried myself in the mountain of work that had piled up over the last 2 days. Even though I was supposedly on leave, my bald, pot-bellied boss still dumped a stack of reports on me. I worked until midnight before finally finishing. During that time, the big rat woke up once, drank some water, and immediately went back to sleep. Though his sleeping posture was questionable. Instead of curling up, he slept completely sprawled out on his back, all 4 limbs spread wide like a starfish, belly sticking up. Every now and then, his legs twitched at the air while he muttered curses in his sleep, probably dreaming about fighting stray cats again. Watching that scene finally reassured the black rat. Boss really revived. I was exhausted too and threw myself onto the bed. A case solved. Another criminal behind bars. But as long as I can hear the voices of rats, cockroaches, flies, and mosquitoes, trouble will always find me. And my next case was already on its way.